effect tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And in leadership especially, if you're in charge of a worship program, it could take years to build a strong worship team and to get exactly where you want to be, right? So that's what I'm talking about in Worship Leadership Foundations. I'm inviting you to join me. If you want to be in the beta group, check the link in the description because it starts in October 2020. Okay, it's going to be podcasts, Bible studies, live webinars, and we're going to dive into a lot of stuff I have on this other screen I'm going to talk about today. But one of the weeks that we're going to have in Worship Leader Foundations is rotating bands or rotating people. Now I know that sounds like okay, what do you mean? Are you going to decide in your worship ministry model to rotate bands, full bands as units, or are you going to rotate people? So just, Andy and Bob and Fred and Tom, a bunch of random guys are going to be on this band this week, and next week it's going to be Andy and Fred and Cindy and Eric. It's going to be that week, and you're just taking and rotating a group of musicians into the band, okay? And it's one band, and you're probably most likely going to be leading worship every Sunday if you're the worship leader, okay? Or are you going to take full bands? So this band A is going to have drummer, bass player, piano player, and acoustic player, and then you're going to lead it. And then the next band is going to be the same thing, a different drummer, different bass player. You have multiple bands. Now that model is one of my favorite models as a worship leader. Growing up playing in rock bands in high school and playing in junior high and then going through college, playing with the same musicians over and over again creates a synergy you do not get when you are rotating a whole bunch of musicians all over the place. Okay, so that's one good thing. We're going to talk about the good and the bad of both models. I'm also going to give you my templates. If you join in Foundations, you'll have my templates that you will actually be able to download my templates, Excel, Google Sheets probably is most likely what I'll turn them into. This is some documents over here that I have. So check these out. Actually, that's not it at all. There it is. So basically, I have a couple of these templates to show you, and a couple of these things that from back in the day when I was putting together some of this. And this was quite a while ago, but this was a model that I was using. And you'll notice in this template here, and I'll scroll over here. If you're going to be rotating a band, so if you're going to rotate a band, you would have the worship leader, the drummer, bass player, acoustic. You kind of put this in the Excel sheet, and then the color was basically for clothes. I mean, it wasn't like we had a huge dress code, but we had sort of like a secretive sort of color matching thing that went through our thing. So basically, then you have your tech team and all this. Every one of these weeks, you had to actually go through and put somebody in place. You had to put these people in place every week. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do if you're trying to schedule people, ask people if they can play, fill in here. You have a different worship leader. This was a youth week. We had sort of a youth band going on here, I think it looks like. So I just pulled this back from the archives, and this is part of the template that I used for the seminar. We have the song list here. We have some of this, looks like we did special songs back then. Some of y'all still may do that, I don't know. This was a long time ago. So we basically just have some details, and if you go further in this list, you'll see some other things in here as we get into these templates. This is how you basically can schedule your band in rotating members. So each week you're rotating members. Now this little document here that I have is maybe more based on still on the band model, but you can see that you can kind of put it in Word, and I kind of create this template. These are the templates, some of the templates that you'll get in Foundations. Okay, but basically you have your piano, your keys, your guitar, your drums, all your band members here, and this is just like a calendar. Then you have your attire, your sound, your vocals. So this is just another way to kind of publish this if you're doing this. And you can make notes. That's another one of the small templates. But basically, I don't have the templates on the screen today, but I'll be going through that in the webinar segments. When you're rotating people, you just go through and you just pick what people you want to be on that week. And so if your drummer's out of town, you just throw a drummer in there. If your bass player wants to play first and third, the problem with that model, if you don't have a lot of musicians, you could end up with holes. I mean, look, guys, there's problems with each one of these models. So I'm not I don't know what model I would pick. And I know that you might not know either. And as we go through foundations, you're going to feel a sense of like, oh, okay, yeah, I think that model would work for me. I know it would work because of this, or I want to get to that. If you want to get to a full 3 or 4 band rotating model, for example, a church that I know, they have 4 full bands, and each band plays like the first Sunday of the month would be band A. And that's what they sign up for in the year. They commit to the whole year. I'm going to be here the first Sunday of the month. That drummer, bass player, guitar player, like that's their, and if they're going to go on vacation, or if they're going to do that, they just plan around it. They just say, oh, I'm not going to go on vacation on the first Sunday of the month because I committed to it. So you can see how that model would really be as a plan. You could almost check that off your list for the whole year. Once you get those bands in place, you know that that's going to happen. Now, if there's something like the drummer, he gets sick and he can't play that Sunday, then he would be responsible, that drummer, to call another drummer on the other teams, and would you fill in? So you can see this could really help if you're planning it out like that. If you have 4 full bands that are all responsible for their week, and you could be this, it could be the same worship leader. I'm not saying that it would be 4 worship leaders. That can get weird, but you could have 4 worship leaders. You could have 4 volunteer worship leaders with 4 volunteer bands, and you could have 1 staff pastor, worship pastor over all of them, who could be playing and developing teams within them. So there's a lot of nuances of this, but if you have 4 full bands that are rotating week by week, the band B would play the second Sunday of every month, and band C would play the third Sunday of every month, then a lot of good things happen. It takes a lot of stress off you. Now, some of you and a lot of you, maybe most of you, are going, no way, there's no way, dude. You can't, there's no way I'm going to get 4 drummers to commit all year. And I get that. If you're a small church, if you're a 100-member church, a 200-member church, even a 500-member church might feel the stress and strain of thinking, oh, I got to have 4 competent bass players, 4 competent drummers, 4 competent piano players, all that could be synergized into 4 movable bands. But that's why I said in the beginning of this video that what you do today affects what happens a year or 2 years from now. That's what happens. When I built this team model in a church that I was in, it was about a church of 400 or 500, and I was building this team model. It took me a good 3 years, maybe almost 4 years, to develop 3 full rotating bands that were very independent almost of me. So it was almost independent of me. I could almost not even be there. In fact, after I left that church, this model continued for almost 10 years, like 7 years. One of the volunteer worship leaders took over after I left, and I think 7 or 8 years later, they were still rotating and going on a volunteer worship team. So for you small churches, pastors who say, we don't have the money to hire a bunch of worship leaders, or even a worship leader, think of putting in place a rotating band model where they're kind of independently teams that can grow and thrive over time, and that can it can really outlast the worship leader position, or the staff position in a church. That can outlast any staff position, because you have volunteers that might go to your church for 15, 20 years, whereas a worship leader may go there for a couple years and move on to a different job, and you get another guy for 5 or 7 years, he moves on, and then if there's not a system in place like this, then every time you start over, you start with a bunch of new people that liked the worship leader when he leaves. Then you got a bunch of people that are like, well, I kind of left too because the worship leader was my friend, and you just got a bunch of stuff that can kind of cave in, So if you're building a long-term plan for your worship ministry, if you're the worship leader, even better, because think about it. You leave in 5 years, and the ministry continues to go on. That's your legacy. That's something behind you, and that's you doubling your efforts even. So you're off onto something else. Your church is still thriving because of the things you did. So look at these sheets here, and you can see that this is some basic stuff, but these are some of the templates that you get in the Foundations Leadership module, which I'm doing beta signups right now. The great thing about beta signups, if you get into this, is you can ask me questions. You could ask me, oh yeah, I need this special thing. And as we're going through the webinars, you can ask live questions. Once it's all done, you'll have access to it forever. You'll be able to log back in. It's 9 weeks of really solid leadership training for you, because you really want to leave behind a legacy. You want to do great while you're there. You don't want to be in ministry and spend most of your time trying to schedule bands and try to figure out, like, this stresses me out. I hate this. This isn't what I want to do. What I wanted to do was lead worship. I wanted to be in the zone. I wanted to be on stage leading worship, praying, and seeing God move. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be in my office every day making phone calls, emailing everybody, trying to deal with all this stuff. You're going to do some of that, but when you put together the leadership skills that I teach in Foundations for Leadership for Worship, those things are minimized. Could be minimized down to very small, like 1 day a month, 1 day every quarter. You might be dealing with scheduling and issues. The rest of the time, you're dealing and zoning in on your ministry, your calling, your number one thing, leading worship, Sunday morning, set list, praying, reading your Bible, practicing your guitar, learning the new songs, the things that really drove me as a worship leader. Those are the things you want to do. You don't want to sit around every day of the week calling all the 13 or 14 volunteers, seeing which one of them is going to be on drums this week. That is not what you want to do. And that's what a lot of this solves. Whether you're going to rotate people or whether you're going to rotate bands or whether you're going to do a hybrid mix of that, you're going to know ahead of time and you're going to get full out scheduled way in advance. That's part of the key to being successful, I believe, as a worship leader, or really anything. If you're scheduling week to week, if you're picking songs week to week, then it's just every week feels like it comes back so fast, and it's like, wow, it's this week again. You've got other stuff to do, probably like mow the grass, take your kid to the skate park, do other things, maybe do your second or third job. Some of you guys are bivocational, so maybe you're at work listening to your second or third boss talk to you about, sales numbers. You can't lead worship well without planning ahead, and you got to be looking at a long game. Will you join me in Worship Leadership Foundations? Click on this link below. It's beta. Also, if you like this, share the video with your friends. Subscribe to the channel because I want you to get all of the good content that we're doing every day and every week. Today, this is Sarasota. This is not my studio. It looks a little different. I didn't move into my living room. I moved into a condo in Sarasota for a couple weeks. We're getting ready to go back to our Nashville base, where I can get in my nice new studio, where I like to be, and we're going to get going in October. So join me there. God bless you. I'll see you.